Hi, Adam Smith, Program Manager of Climate Policy for Southern California Edison. I have a question about the business partnerships through the application process. Have you seen any examples of that happen so far? I'm just trying to wrap my head around what that might look like. Is it being a co-applicant with whatever jurisdiction is applying to these funds? Is it simply after that jurisdiction or governmental agency or body receives those funds that they open up their own RFO process? What does that look like?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I wish it was an easier one to answer, but because there's so many programs, there's not kind of a one-size-fits-all. With the affordable housing program that I just gave a little bit more detail about, I believe that, yes, there can be co-applications or co-applicants. So a city, in addition to an affordable housing developer, can work together on an application. But for the majority of programs, it's, the main applicant has to be the local municipality. Certainly businesses can benefit indirectly. So another program receiving a lot of funds, kind of next in line in terms of amount of funding relative to the high-speed rail and the affordable housing program, is transit, so transit capital, transit operations, and so a lot of transportation engineering firms, transportation technology firms, they're going to be receiving dollars because of the money that's going to go out to them through the really through the transit agencies.
Hi, Colleen. I'm Andy Carrasco with Southern California Gas Company. Just a general question on why do you think that Southern California is not getting their fair share, though we have population? What is it? Just a lack of education, resources, what have you?
Well, we haven't. We're too early in the process to say that Southern California isn't getting its fair share, but we want to be diligent about this issue. We're still kind of hearing back from the various agencies in terms of where the projects are being funded throughout the state, and we don't have all those decisions yet. We will soon, so we'll be able to assess that pretty quickly. But it was just kind of seeing where we are with certain programs in terms of giving kind of applicants the opportunity to apply, to submit full proposals, which is an indication how things are going. At least for the Sustainable Communities Program, things weren't looking as great for Southern California as for some other parts of the state. So there is some variation amongst the programs early in the process, but I just kind of wanted to raise this issue that it's a competitive funding process. So even though it seems like LA County could receive a lion's share, and have given some of the kind of priorities around the GGRF, it's not guaranteed. And so it's important that we are diligent and work together to go after these funds.
Can you relate the Strategic Growth Council and then these are policies being put into place? So who leads the implementation of these policies in a municipal, into regions where municipalities are? How do the municipalities learn and apply with perhaps nonprofits to source capital to implement their projects?
If I understand your question right, it's focused on the affordable housing and sustainable communities program, and and then the metropolitan planning organizations are the municipal entities that have a big role because it's their sustainable communities strategy that needs to be kind of aligned with the project applications. So it would be SCAG, the Southern California Association of Governments, in our case.
And how does the Strategic Growth Council relate to that?
Well, the Strategic Growth Council is a state agency, and then there's these regional metropolitan planning organizations. And SCAG is by far the largest MPO in the state. So they're coordinating with Strategic Growth Council, but don't always say exactly eye to eye.
Speaking of SCAG,
Yes.
Jason Greenspan from
Great.
SCAG. Two-part question. You alluded to the grant writing process in the Bay Area, for example, and that there were grant writing teams that might have resulted in some more success in one region versus another. Maybe, is there a way for you to flesh out that part of your presentation a little bit? And secondly, do you feel that there's a role for MPOs or other stakeholders to influence the program guidelines that are perhaps being revisited at this very moment?
Okay, great. Yeah, I had just brought that up as an example of something that happened in the past, separate from the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund process. But we did see with ARA dollars that per capita, the Bay Area received more funding than the LA region did per capita. It was a pretty significant split. And then in terms of your second question, yes, I do think there's certainly an opportunity for stakeholders, including local governments, businesses, business associations, to help inform both the overall guidelines that then inform the program level guidelines, and an opportunity to directly impact the program level guidelines. Because as I've emphasized, we are early in this process. It's a complex kind of multi-year process, and we're just kind of starting it, to be honest. Even though we're in year 2 of the investment plan, there's still a lot to be worked out.
My name is Stacey Putman. I'm glad to discover BizFed. I'm new in town, and the more I say, the more you'll know where I'm from because of my accent. Colleen, your presentation was easy to understand, easy to follow, and appreciate it. Thinking about some things Dennis said and some things you said, one of the things I heard him say was one of the options is for businesses to close down. I'm a plant manager in one of those red locations, not too far from here. And I don't want to close down. And other people that work for me want to lose their jobs. But it seems like that pie you showed has a big old piece. Yeah, I'm from Texas, we say pie. So that pie has a big old percentage of money that wasn't allocated. And I've lived in California long, and Woodbury does a lot of innovative things. And we're looking for technology options that will help us stay open. That will help us provide jobs for these people in these red areas. I think jobs are what we need. I appreciate sustainable housing, because that creates jobs too. But all these chairs y'all are sitting in, the plastic that's made of, is only made in one place west of the Rockies. That's made at my plant. I'm the last one. So I'm telling y'all, jobs is really important. Housing is super important. I'm sure this rail system is going to create some jobs. If y'all shut us down, this money's going to run out. That sounded like that was okay to Dennis. And I don't want to get a fight started, but, you know, I tell you what, all these people working for me, we'd fight for it.
Well, I'm glad that you brought up the point of jobs and the importance of jobs in thinking about what do we strategically invest in. And I'd mentioned that law that requires that the funds from the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, cap and trade auction revenues, don't just go to projects that reduce GHGs, but they also need to make sure that these investments have co-benefits, including economic co-benefits. So we should be evaluating the amount of jobs created and the impact that these investments will have on businesses that are located in California. We brought up several times the guidelines, even though this sounds so mundane and boring guidelines, but really they're foundational because they then inform how the different agencies evaluate different project options, different investment options. And so if we can continue to kind of strengthen the criteria for how we should be evaluating, how the state and the state agencies should be evaluating investment options based on their potential to maximize co-benefits, including economic co-benefits, then I think we'll be on continuously stronger footing.
Question about the funding process. You put up a slide that had, a dozen plus agencies and programs that are involved in that. Is there, how many of those, you gave the example of housing, how many of those have already done solicitations? How many of them are still working on what they're soliciting for? Is there a master schedule that the governor's office or somebody maintains so that municipalities can anticipate when there are going to be solicitations, what they're going to be for, in order to try to make sure that the LA region or the Southern California region does get is shared? And then related to that, you talked about the allocation for disadvantaged communities. Is that within each of those categories typically, or are there separate solicitations specifically for those investments? Thank you.
Good questions. I wish, to address your first question, I wish there was a master timeline that all the agencies followed. Everyone kind of has a different date in terms of when they finished their updating their program guidelines, and when applications were due, and then when they released their funding decisions. Decisions need to be made by the end of this fiscal year for the funds allocated to this fiscal year. So June 30th, I guess, is the kind of drop dead deadline. But we're approaching that deadline. We haven't had data released from all the agencies in terms of the projects that they're funding and the investments that they're making for just this fiscal year. So no, there hasn't been like a master calendar, but a lot of resources to help those interested in applying for the dollars to quickly see what are the different deadlines for each agency, and those will continue next year. So let me know if you're interested in being connected to some of those resources. Really, just kind of easy to follow kind of calendars. It's a lot of agencies, but it's doable to like get it all one long page. And then your other question. I guess, and I should say, and there could be more streamlining in the future, but this is the first year, so kinks are being worked out. And remind me, I'm sorry, what your second question was.
Disadvantaged funding, the funding for disadvantaged communities, is that embedded in all the solicitations, or there are unique solicitations for that?
I don't think there's unique solicitations. There are some programs that really emphasize investments in disadvantaged communities, investments that will benefit disadvantaged communities, like the energy efficiency program for residences. It's really all to benefit low-income households in disadvantaged communities. And some programs are just less applicable for disadvantaged communities. And so there's some variation there too, but you can apply just in the normal process.
So it's not 40% across the board, some may be more, some may be less.
Absolutely, yes.
MC Townsend, BizFat Chair. Same question, similar to what Holly had just asked. I'm not sure if I got the clarity on that, but the funding itself is coming from the local municipalities, is that correct? I mean, overall, or is it just from the state agencies? And again, I guess my question would be just a better explanation as to how the disadvantaged communities would they be able to obtain these type of fundings? Okay. You see what I mean?
Yeah, so
I'm not really clear, because if there's no guidelines, I'm sorry, cutting you off. If there's no one, if the governor's office doesn't direct the local municipalities to when the funding comes in, and if the local communities, aka BizFeds, chambers, local partners in the community, know when the local municipalities have the funding, how is it that we are going to support this process or get it moving in an aggressive term so it can affect the affordability?
That's a big question, right? How do we coordinate all these different parties? If you remember my kind of very first slide after the intro slide, the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund dollars go to the state agencies, bunch of state agencies. They have their various programs, right? And then the local municipalities, in partnership with local partners, can then apply to the state agencies for funding within the different program buckets, okay? So disadvantaged communities are just kind of another way of, they're census tracts. That's all they are. So it just means that if, say, the city of LA is applying for funding for, I guess, the affordable housing, I keep bringing that up, so it just comes to mind, then they might work with a low-income housing developer, apply for the funding, and in their application describe that the program is going to be located in one of these disadvantaged communities. And so that should give them a little leg up in the scoring process, but it's not a guarantee of funding by any means.
Thank you. Frank Lopez from LA Chamber of Commerce. You spent a lot of time talking about the geographic equity on the expenditure side. Can you talk a little bit about the geographic equity on the revenue side? which regions are paying the majority of amount of money that's being allocated for the GGRF fund?
I
And we'll put it in
don't-
the, is LA County
yeah.
paying the most into the fund and not getting a fair share?
I hesitate to answer that question because I don't know for sure. But if I had to guess, I would say that yes, Southern California is probably paying more cumulatively than Northern California because we know where the pollution is kind of disproportionately located. And these are sources that emit some emissions. And so, yes, if we remember Dennis's map of all the different sources that fall under the cap, there was definitely a concentration in Southern California. But I can't definitively say that. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. Now I'll turn it back to Tracy.